Roads can turn deadly in an instant, and the tragedies that unfold often leave behind haunting details that are hard to forget. In this video, we'll uncover 5 more of the most disturbing car crash deaths ever recorded, each one a powerful reminder that life is fragile, especially when disaster strikes at full speed. On a quiet July morning in 2022, 3 young lives collided with tragedy in the most violent way possible. What began as an ordinary night out would end in devastation, leaving 2 families grieving and 1 teenager facing the rest of her life behind bars. At the center of it all was 17-year-old Mackenzie Sharilla, a high school student whose turbulent relationship with her boyfriend Dominic Russo had spiraled into a storm of conflict, threats, and emotional volatility. By dawn, decisions made behind the wheel of her Toyota Camry would permanently alter the course of multiple lives. 20-year-old Dominic Russo was a young man with ambitions. Despite his age, Dominic was already a business owner, a devoted son, and a loving uncle to his nieces and nephews. He had been in a relationship with Mackenzie for nearly 4 years, but their bond had grown toxic. Constant fights, threats, and repeated breakups marred their relationship. According to Dominic's mother, Christine, Mackenzie became increasingly possessive, often unfair toward her son. Their fights did not remain behind closed doors. Friends intervened during heated moments, including one incident when Dominic had to be pulled out of Mackenzie's car by others. Witnesses later recounted how she had threatened to crash the vehicle with Dominic inside. In another instance, Mackenzie was overheard warning she would damage Dominic's car unless he let her inside his family home. Despite these red flags, the relationship persisted, with Dominic even living with Mackenzie in one of his family's properties. In the early hours of July 31st, 2022, Mackenzie, Dominic, and their friend Davian Flanagan, 19, spent time moving between gatherings. They attended a graduation party, then drove to another friend's house where they stayed until after midnight. By the time the trio left, it was around 5:30 a.m. Davian, a friend of Dominic's, simply needed a ride home. He could not have known that he was about to become an unintended victim. The drive began uneventfully, with Mackenzie appearing calm and in control of her vehicle, but as they approached the Plitco building in Strongsville, Ohio, the situation turned catastrophic. Surveillance footage later revealed what prosecutors described as chillingly deliberate. For several blocks, Mackenzie obeyed the speed limit. Then, as she neared the building, she suddenly pressed the accelerator to the floor, pushing the Camry to 100 miles per hour. The car veered into the corner of the structure, slamming head-on with immense force. There was no attempt to brake. The Camry crumpled instantly, the impact so violent that both Dominic and Davian were killed on the spot. Their bodies were mangled in the wreckage. Mackenzie, however, was pulled unconscious from the driver's seat. She was not breathing when first responders arrived, but was resuscitated and rushed to the hospital, where she underwent multiple surgeries and ultimately survived. The aftermath revealed layers of evidence. The car's data recorder confirmed that the accelerator pedal had been fully depressed in the seconds before the crash, with no application of the brakes. Mackenzie's fuzzy slipper was found lodged near the gas pedal, but forensic experts claimed it could not have caused accidental acceleration. Investigators also discovered she had scouted the route days earlier, suggesting careful planning. Social media further exposed a pattern of reckless behavior, with videos showing her driving while distracted or under the influence. Prosecutors argued that this was no accident, but what they called a mission of death, a final act to end a toxic relationship on her own terms. For Davian's family, the pain was compounded by the randomness of his death. Prosecutors described him as cargo in Mackenzie's mind, an innocent passenger in the wrong place at the wrong time. His parents pleaded for justice, saying their son was nothing more than a young man looking for a ride home. In August 2023, during a bench trial without a jury, Cuyahoga County Common Pleas Court Judge Nancy Margaret Russo delivered a scathing verdict. Mackenzie was found guilty of 12 charges, including aggravated vehicular homicide and felonious assault. Judge Russo dismissed the defense's claims of accidental loss of control, calling Mackenzie literal hell on wheels. She emphasized that Mackenzie alone chose the route, the time, and the speed, executing her plan with precision. The conviction carried an automatic life sentence, with parole eligibility after 15 years. Mackenzie will be 34 before she is eligible for release. Her family continues to insist she suffered a medical event and has pursued appeals, but the court's judgment was clear. What happened that morning was intentional, and for the families of Dominic Russo and Davian Flanagan, the loss is immeasurable. On April 19, 2019, in the bustling Higashi Ikebukuro district of Tokyo, the apparent calm of the day was shattered in a matter of moments. At a busy intersection, where pedestrians and cyclists passed through in the middle of the day, an event unfolded that would claim lives, injure many, and ignite national outrage. Among the people crossing the street that afternoon were a mother and her young daughter. Their presence at the intersection would soon become a central part of a tragedy that shook Japan. 87 31-year-old Kozo Izuka was at the wheel of his car. Izuka was a highly respected figure who had once served as director of the Industrial Science and Technology Agency of the former Ministry of International Trade and Industry, and later held senior positions in international organizations. By 2019, however, Izuka was suffering from leg problems suspected to be linked to Parkinson's disease. Despite his declining health, he continued to drive, a decision that would have grave consequences. At 12:25 p.m., Izuka's Toyota Prius accelerated uncontrollably through the streets near Tokyo Metro Higashi Ikebukuro Station. Surveillance and dashcam recordings later revealed the shocking details. The car weaving through traffic, ignoring red lights and pushing to nearly 100 kilometers per hour in an area with a 50 kilometer per hour limit. His wife sat in the passenger seat as he hurried to a French restaurant reservation. Witnesses later described the Prius plowing through traffic, smashing into a garbage truck, overturning it, and then bursting into the intersection. There was no record of braking. The car's data recorder showed only acceleration, never the press of a brake pedal. In seconds, the Prius slammed into multiple pedestrians and cyclists. At the same time, 31-year-old Mana Matsunaga and her 3-year-old daughter, Riko, were crossing the street together at the pedestrian crossing, moving through the intersection. There was no time for them to react as Izuka's car hurtled towards them. Mana and Riko were struck directly. The impact left them no chance of survival. 12 others were injured, including Izuka himself and his wife. Instead of contacting the police, Izuka called his son. He said the accelerator had not come back up and admitted he had hit people. But an inspection by the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department confirmed the vehicle was functioning properly. The airbags deployed as designed, and no mechanical defects were found. The crash was determined to have been caused by Izuka's mistaken operation. The brutality of the incident shocked Japan. Initial reports listed 8 injuries and 2 deaths. Days later, authorities confirmed that another mother and daughter had also been lightly injured, bringing the total to 12 injured or killed. The funeral for Mana and Riko took place on April 24th. That same day, Takuya Matsunaga, Mana's husband and Riko's father, addressed the public in a press conference, releasing images of his wife and daughter. In July, he launched a petition campaign demanding Izuka's indictment, gathering more than 391,000 signatures. Legal proceedings moved slowly. On November 12, 2019, police filed papers with prosecutors, and in February 2020, Izuka was indicted, though not arrested. His privileged status and the police decision not to detain him despite the gravity of the crash provoked widespread anger. When his trial began in October 2020, he denied wrongdoing, continuing to claim the car malfunctioned and saying he had no memory of pressing the accelerator. But in March 2021, an engineer from the car's manufacturer testified that no problems were found. On September 2, 2021, the Tokyo District Court sentenced Izuka to 5 years. Neither side appealed. He was later stripped of his Medal of Honor. In October 2023, a civil court ordered him to pay 140 million yen in compensation to the Matsunaga family. Kozo Izuka died of natural causes in prison on October 26, 2024, at the age of 93. By then, his name had become a symbol of privilege and the dangers of elderly drivers. For Takuya Matsunaga, who had lost his wife and child in a matter of seconds, the fight for justice was always about more than punishment. 3 lives came together on a July morning in 2024 on a stretch of California's Highway 1, where the road clings tightly to the cliffs above the Pacific. The highway is famed for its beauty, but equally feared for its sharp turns and unforgiving drops. Alongside the sweeping ocean views lies a bad reputation, a place where a single mistake can lead to irreversible consequences. On that Friday, a gray sedan carried 3 people with connections to military service. Their journey, however, would not reach its destination. 29-year-old Mohammed Nouri of South San Francisco, 28-year-old Angelica Gacho, also of South San Francisco, and 36-year-old Brylan Aroma of Fort Riley, Kansas, were riding in the car. Each of them carried a story shaped by service and sacrifice. Mohammed had immigrated to the United States in 2021 after serving as a military interpreter in Afghanistan. He achieved a special immigrant visa for his work with the U.S. military and came seeking better opportunities to support his family. Friends described him as the only financial provider for his parents and siblings still living in Afghanistan. Mohammed was working as an Uber driver. Angelica had served as a U.S. Army communications specialist in Korea. Her military career was reflected on her LinkedIn and through glimpses she shared online. Just months earlier, she had celebrated her engagement, posting that her fiancé was the highlight of her life. For Angelica, service had become both profession and community, a path that marked her life. Brylan was a U.S. Army medic stationed at Fort Riley in Kansas. She had been recognized by her unit, commended for her initiative in building bridges between soldiers and allied forces, and praised for her skills and selfless service. Known among her peers for her commitment, Bryland's presence was described as vital in ensuring safety and improving training for her battalion. Away from her duties, she had been building a future with her boyfriend, who described her as his rock and his world. Late that Friday morning, the gray two-door sedan they traveled in veered off the southbound lane of Highway 1, south of the Tom Lantos tunnels, in an area known as Devil's Slide. The car plunged an estimated 300 to 400 feet down the cliffside, coming to rest on an embankment near the ocean. Authorities responded quickly. The California Highway Patrol, CAL FIRE crews, and other emergency personnel shut down the highway and began rescue and recovery efforts. A CAL FIRE team rappelled down the cliff to reach the wrecked vehicle. 2 people were discovered inside and pronounced dead at the scene. Recovery crews worked under difficult conditions, with a rising tide creating what officials described as incredibly dangerous circumstances. Because of this, the effort to reach the 3rd victim had to be temporarily suspended. The following day, after conditions allowed, the 3rd body was recovered. The vehicle itself was later removed from the site by a tow truck. News of the crash spread quickly as photographs showed the car overturned near the water below the cliffs. The identities of the 3 victims were confirmed by the San Mateo County Coroner's Office in the days that followed. In the aftermath, grief extended across states and communities. Muhammad's death left his family in Afghanistan without their only supporter. Angelica's career and engagement ended suddenly, leaving her loved ones to mourn what might have been. Bryland's boyfriend and colleagues expressed their heartbreak, remembering her not only for her service but also for the life she was planning beyond it. The crash remains under investigation. For those who knew Muhammad, Angelica, and Bryland, the events at Devil's Slide are not only a public tragedy, but a deeply personal loss. On that winding road above the Pacific, 3 lives ended abruptly, leaving behind futures that will remain unwritten. On a clear afternoon in Tadoussac on June 24, 2019, the usual bustle of cars, tourists, and pedestrians at the ferry terminal was suddenly pierced by the sound of a horn blaring without pause. People turned their heads toward the steep slope of Highway 138, where a large recreational vehicle came barreling down at frightening speed, swerving dangerously as it closed in on the crowded waterfront. What followed in those frantic seconds would leave witnesses shaken, their memories of the scene etched in fear and disbelief. 40-year-old Eric Belek, a resident of Laval, was traveling in a recreational vehicle on Highway 138, a steep descent leading directly to the ferry crossing over the Saguenay River. His companion, a 40-year-old woman from Lévis, was in the vehicle with him. Both were en route toward the ferry terminal when an apparent mechanical failure caused the brakes of the RV to give out. What followed was a harrowing struggle for control. The background to this accident is inseparable from the geography of Tadoussac. Highway 138 is a notorious slope leading directly to the loading ramp of the ferry that connects Tadoussac and Baie-Sainte-Catherine. The terminal is often crowded with tourists, pedestrians, and vehicles waiting to board or depart. Local residents, including the mayor of Tadoussac, have long voiced concerns about the safety of this stretch of road. Its steep incline funnels heavy vehicles, buses, and summer tourist traffic directly toward the water. Some had been raising concerns for years, urging public officials to consider reconfiguring the hill before tragedy struck. On the day of the accident, Eric's RV began to accelerate uncontrollably as it approached the terminal. Witnesses recalled hearing the blaring horn as he repeatedly honked, a frantic attempt to warn those ahead of the danger hurtling toward them. Accounts describe how he swerved deliberately into metal barriers at the roadside, apparently trying to slow the vehicle and protect those in its path. Pedestrians scrambled to get out of the way, including one couple walking their dog, who managed to avoid being struck in the final seconds. Observers agreed that his quick actions prevented an already dire situation from becoming catastrophic. When the RV reached the bottom of the hill, it launched off the raised ferry loading ramp, sailing through the air before crashing down onto the stern of a ferry that had just departed on its 10-minute journey toward Baie-Sainte-Catherine. People aboard watched in shock as the vehicle shattered on impact. Some passengers sprinted across the deck to avoid being struck by the wreckage. Emergency responders rushed to the scene. Both Eric and his passenger were pulled from the mangled RV and taken to hospital. Despite the urgent efforts of medical teams, Eric succumbed to his injuries hours later. His companion remained hospitalized in critical condition. Provincial police later confirmed that a mechanical problem with the RV appeared to be the cause of the accident. Ferry service was halted for several hours as rescue and recovery operations took place before resuming with limited capacity later that evening. Authorities and local residents reflected on how narrowly greater tragedy had been avoided. The mayor noted that children and tourists often gather at the back of the ferry to admire the view. If the timing had been different by mere seconds, lives on the vessel could have been lost. Witnesses openly called Eric a hero, crediting him with saving others through his split-second decisions in the face of mechanical failure. The courage Eric showed until the very end was immense. In the days following the incident, conversations turned again to the safety of Highway 138. Local officials stressed the need for infrastructure improvements while also urging caution in vehicle maintenance. Yet even amid the debate, one truth remained clear to those who had seen the crash. Eric Bellick's final act transformed an unfolding catastrophe into a tragedy that, while profound, could have been far worse. 16-year-old Kaylee Mills was full of promise, a bright and ambitious student whose laughter and energy left a lasting impression on everyone she met. Living in Spring, Texas, she had a reputation for her outgoing personality, her kindness, and her drive to succeed. Friends and family described her as a ray of sunshine, someone whose smile and laughter had the power to lift spirits instantly. But in October of 2017, just blocks from her home, one small decision changed everything. Kaylee was a junior at Klein Collins High School, excelling academically with a 4.3 GPA. She was already enrolled in college-level classes and planned to attend Texas A&M University to pursue a career in biomedical science, with the dream of becoming a dermatologist. Beyond academics, she was involved in volleyball, her church youth group, and organizations like Young Life, the National Charity League, and Legacy League. She loved volunteering and giving back to her community. Friends and family alike noted that she had a rare ability to make anyone feel comfortable, and she thrived on spreading laughter and joy wherever she went. On October 28, 2017, Kaylee left her home with 3 friends to attend a Halloween party. She was sitting in the back seat as the group traveled along Rothwood Road, not far from her own neighborhood. Just moments into the ride, she unbuckled her seatbelt so she could slide closer to a friend and take a selfie. It was an uncharacteristic decision, as Kaylee was known for constantly reminding others to wear their seatbelts. In fact, she was so dedicated to safety that friends recalled she never moved a car until every passenger was buckled in. But on that night, for only a moment, she let her guard down. Harris County Sheriff's deputies later said they believed the driver was speeding when control of the vehicle was lost. The car veered off the road and rolled over violently. While the other 3 passengers, all wearing their seatbelts, walked away with only minor injuries, Kaylee was thrown from the back seat with fatal force. She died instantly, just 400 to 500 yards from her home. The sudden loss left her parents, David and Wendy Mills, devastated. They later said they knew without question that if she had been wearing her seatbelt, she would have survived. When news of the crash reached them, David and Wendy used the Life 360 app to locate their daughter. The location showed she was just down the road, and they were taken to the scene by friends. When they arrived, they found police vehicles crowding the area, and soon after they were told the unimaginable truth. The Mills later described the disbelief they felt, with Wendy repeating to herself that it could not be real. In the aftermath, Kaylee's parents decided to turn their grief into a mission. They founded the Kaylee Mills Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting seatbelt safety. The group distributes car decals as reminders to buckle up and works with organizations across Texas to prevent similar tragedies. They also partnered with the Texas Department of Transportation in its Click It or Ticket campaign. One part of the campaign included a display of ghost shoes, with pairs of white shoes symbolizing the nearly 1,000 people killed in seatbelt-related crashes in Texas each year. Among them were pink shoes placed by the Mills to represent Kaylee. Through their foundation, David and Wendy continue to honor their daughter's legacy, reminding others of the importance of seatbelt use. They emphasize how quickly a life can change, noting that it takes only 3 seconds to buckle up. For them, Kaylee's story stands as a heartbreaking but powerful reminder that even the briefest lapse can have irreversible consequences.